The Alberta government signed on to a deal with the Trudeau Liberals for the $10 a day childcare. Ontario has still not signed on. And like Premier Jason Kenney, Ontario Premier Doug Ford says Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is making too many demands. To discuss this in more detail is political reporter Brian Lilley joining us once again from Toronto. Brian, when Alberta signed on to the deal, Premier Kenney dismissed the federal contribution, saying, you know what, it's just recycled provincial money anyway, and accused Trudeau of playing favourites.
Well, he's absolutely right. I mean, you look at why Kenney didn't sign a deal earlier, or why Ford in Ontario hasn't signed a deal yet, and it comes down to the same issue. The federal government is putting on a bunch of demands. From my understanding of the situation, the Alberta government was ready to sign on a while ago, and then they looked at the deal Quebec got, and Quebec got a deal with no conditions. Here's $6 billion, do what you want with it. And Premier Kenney rightly looked and said, well, wait a minute, why is Quebec getting that deal and we're being given all these conditions if we want the money? That's the same situation here in Ontario. The last major holdout province, New Brunswick also hasn't signed on, but Ontario is the big fish that's left. And it's the same sort of setup where the federal government is coming into an area of provincial jurisdiction and saying, here's what we want, and you're going to do A, and you're going to do B, and you're going to do C, and we'll give you the money, and you just do what we say, and we'll take all the credit, and you do all the work. And provinces have been pushing back. Now, at the end of the day, Premier Kenney did sign on, and he said this was the best deal that Alberta could get. It isn't the full free reign that Quebec has. We'll see what Ontario Premier Doug Ford signs up with at the end, but this is another instance of the federal government saying, okay, everyone has to act just like Quebec and do exactly what Quebec does because that's the province that we love the most. That's not something that's going to sit well with people. One of the reasons, I love this argument, Hal, one of the reasons that we're told that we need this national childcare program is that it gets more women into the workforce. Okay. Does it get more women into the workforce because they want to be or because they have to be because taxes are so high to pay for this? Here's the reality. Alberta has long had a higher participation rate of women than Quebec has. Quebec is lower than every province from Ontario West. I mean, they're only higher than the Atlantic provinces, which economically are not exactly booming. So, and it's been that way for more than a decade, even during Alberta's Great Recession, with the oil price falling, with all the struggles that you guys have had. Alberta has more women in the workforce without a universal government-run childcare program than Quebec has. So, yeah, it is favorites, and it is the federal government in Ottawa choosing one style, one province over everyone else.
Brian, a Saskatchewan senator has launched a bid to review the leadership of Conservative leader Erin O'Toole. What is really driving this one?
I think a large part of what's driving this, and I have not talked to Senator Denise Batters about this. We do chat from time to time. I've known Senator Batters for a while. I knew her late husband when he was an MP before taking his life through suicide. And we've often discussed why she got involved in politics and struggles with mental health and, a wide range of issues. Senator Batters is a very smart woman. She was a lawyer. She was, highly involved in the government of Saskatchewan at both the political and bureaucratic level. She's someone who knows what she's doing, but I'm not sure what she's doing here. She has launched this petition saying we need a leadership review when there's no mechanism for a leadership review under the Constitution of the Conservative Party of Canada unless MPs want one. And right now, MPs don't want one, or they probably would have started calling for one by now. We're in a minority government. The Trudeau Liberals won with the slimmest margin of any government in Canadian history. We could be facing an election at any time. And whatever you think of Erin O'Toole, at the end of the day, a leadership race is going to take a year or so. You're basically giving Justin Trudeau carte blanche. And, I hate to quote the Toronto Star and my old colleague, Susan Delacourt, but she had a headline the other day that said, any bad day for Aaron O'Toole is a good day for Justin Trudeau. And when you've got members of the caucus openly calling for this guy to be dumped, Trudeau just gets to eat it all up. And he's got his own problems that he's not dealing with right now. And what's generating more headlines than Trudeau's problems? Aaron O'Toole's problems, which is basically comes down to internal party squabbling. So I'm not sure what's behind this. I'll have to talk to her in coming days and let you know what's going on there. But last week it was a different leadership problem for Aaron O'Toole. Now it's another one. It seems like whack-a-mole. One gets put down, another one pops up.
So while it appears as though O'Toole has some leadership issues, you say our prime minister is apparently failing on the world stage, and he's getting away with it. Now, he's in Washington this week, but you don't expect much movement on key trade issues from automobiles to lumber.
To lumber, to country of origin labeling, which is incredibly important for the whole issue surrounding, the cattle industry, the hog industry. This is an issue that the Americans drive that says you've got to put which country the meat comes from. Well, much like we have an integrated auto industry, in some ways we have an integrated agricultural industry, and the Americans want this country of origin labeling put down or put out there because they want people to say, oh, that's not made in the USA beef. That's not made in the USA pork. We're not buying that. And so this is something that they keep fighting. We keep fighting on softwood lumber, and we haven't had a deal in years under the Trudeau Liberals. They keep dropping the ball on every front. An awful lot of the focus over the coming days is going to be on two issues. One has great interest to your viewership. One does not. The issue of interest to your viewership is Line 5. That takes oil from Western Canada, mainly Alberta, but a little bit Saskatchewan as well, and brings it to Ontario and Quebec, but also to Michigan, to Illinois, to Indiana. It provides most of the jet fuel for Toronto's Pearson International Airport. And that could be shut down by the Michigan governor because while for the most part, this pipeline runs through Canada, it cuts through the Straits of Mackinac, which is in Michigan, and cuts through across the Great Lakes and comes back into Canada around Sarnia. If that gets shut down, we lose an awful lot of vital fuels here in Eastern Canada, fuels that come from Western Canada. That is on the agenda, and I don't expect Joe Biden to do anything about it because it goes against his domestic agenda. Same with automobiles. He's signing the Build Back Better Act. He's putting into law this idea that they're going to give incredible rebates on electric vehicles, but only if pretty much everything in it is made in America. That is going to shut down Canadian automobile manufacturing. And what does Justin Trudeau have to say about it? Not a whole lot. People I've been speaking to said, you know what, since the Trump administration was defeated in the election, the Trudeau Liberals have been asleep. They were on guard during Trump because Trump was protectionist, no question about it. And we had to worry about that of, what we do to our steel, our aluminum, to our agricultural products, a whole range of issues, and the renegotiation of NAFTA. But when Biden came in, he was even more protectionist, and they went to sleep for months, and they've just started waking up now. It might be too late with this Three Amigos Summit coming up on Thursday.
Brian, let's talk about inflation for just a moment here. It's becoming more expensive for so many Canadian families. Food, rent, gas, all going up. And now there's word that there have been more price increases for canola and wheat, which is good news for farmers, but may not be good news for consumers.
I was talking to a farmer just the other day, and he said, I've been selling my canola for about between $10 and $12 a bushel for the last several years. He said that's been around the price range they've been getting. He just got a quote of $23 a bushel. That is an incredible price increase. Now, not all of that is going into his pocket. Let's face it. If you follow agriculture, it wasn't the greatest of yields this year. They couldn't get all of the crop out of the fields. That was a big part of it. But this is a major increase still. And you look at canola going up, you look at wheat is increased, certain meat products have increased at that level as well. And so it takes a while for that to work through to what you and I are paying. Um, all of those things are going up. You look at wheat, you look at canola. These are products. It's not just you buying a bag of Robin Hood flour to bake some muffins. It's not just you buying a bottle of canola oil to cook dinner. These are products that are in everything now. And so any processed, any prepared food is going to drive up the price. So we have to be worried about that. And I don't think that the Trudeau government has a handle on inflation. We're going to get new numbers out tomorrow. Scotiabank, for example, has a new report out, and it says a big concern for them is the spending that the Trudeau government is doing, that this could help contribute to inflation. There's not a lot that they can do when it comes to agricultural products because some of that is driven by increased demand and lower supply because of problems, droughts, and other issues in different parts of the world. But when it comes to the government's role in this, Scotiabank, in a note to clients this week, was saying, we're worried that if they keep spending more, it's going to drive up prices. We're already at 6 months of record inflation over the last 20 years. We're about to hit month 7. We'll get those numbers early on Wednesday morning.
You know, I've noticed with our own family, when we go out grocery shopping, $300-400 buys us maybe half as much as it did a couple of years ago. It's incredible right now. Brian, federal workers who refuse to be vaccinated were put on unpaid leave this week. Now, it appears as though thousands more were able to continue working without meeting the mandate's demands. Were there maybe some loopholes in the system here?
Yeah, despite Justin Trudeau saying, "Oh, we're going to be tough, and there's not going to be any loopholes," and and this is why he had to reelect him, was to make sure that Martha, who processed some accounts from her basement in suburban Ottawa, was fully vaccinated and not infecting. I don't know how she would infect you in Lethbridge while working in her basement in Ottawa, but this was the argument that Justin Trudeau made, and yet, despite saying that the core public service, which it's strange. You think of federal government workers, but then there's all these definitions. And so core public service doesn't include Parks Canada. It doesn't include the Canada Revenue Agency. It doesn't include the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. And they may have brought in their own processes as well, but it was a much smaller group than most of us would think. And out of about 267,000, just over 1,000 or so were put on unpaid leave because they just said, no, I'm not vaccinated. I'm not getting vaccinated. But thousands more, between 2,000 and 3,000, asked for an accommodation, a religious or a medical accommodation. Justin Trudeau said those would be exceedingly rare. Of course, he knew that that couldn't be the case. And so he campaigned hard against Erin O'Toole and the Conservatives and said, he won't protect you, I will. And yet the end result is going to be very much the same, Hal. This, as I've been telling you for months now, was a pure political play by Justin Trudeau, one that I would argue paid off for him at the ballot box, which is why he's still prime minister, despite having the smallest margin of any government in Canadian history.
Brian, let's chat about some of the recent comments from Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe on nation status. Apparently, there's a general feeling that the East views the West here as a milk cow, or perhaps even more like a cash cow?
A bit of both. Have you ever seen the old editorial cartoon from about 100 years ago? 1915 it came out in the Grain Grower's Guide. It was called The Milk Cow, and it shows farmers in Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta feeding a cow. I mean, they've got the pitchforks, they're pulling up the hay, they're putting it towards the cow's mouth, and then at the back end of the cow are businessmen in top hats milking the cow into buckets labeled Ottawa, Toronto, and Montreal. Well, that was a view 100 years ago of how many Westerners felt, and I don't think it's changed. When you look at how they view it, Scott Moe said that he's been speaking for some time about the need for his province, like Alberta, to flex their muscle, to say, look, we're going to look after our own issues and not rely on the federal government. They want increased participation on immigration and who gets to come, not because they want fewer numbers, but they want to figure out who's best for their local economy, much like Quebec does. They want increased say over policing, not just using the RCMP, but maybe a provincial force like Ontario and Quebec do. They want to consider collecting their own taxes like Quebec, which is something that all the parties were fighting themselves over to say they supported in the last election. And yet, when Scott Moe says this, it is viewed as, what are you people out west talking about? Just keep feeding the cow, and we're going to milk it out here in Eastern Canada. I will tell you this, Hal. When I tweeted out the image of the old cartoon, and people can find it on my feed, Peter MacKay, of course, a Nova Scotia boy, replied to me and said, "So does that mean Atlantic Canada gets what comes out the other end?" There is an imbalance in this country, and too often people in central Canada just look at the prairies, especially. We forget about BC, much like BC forgets about the rest of Canada, but they view the prairies as just a place to pull money out of. And, we can make up the rules for you here in central Canada, but, just keep sending us the money. And which is why Quebec can have that daycare program they do, and Alberta is begging the federal government for the money to do what they want to do.
Toronto Sun columnist and one of our regular contributors, Brian Lilley, thanks for joining me today from Toronto.
Thank you, Hal.